She serves as a community manager for Paradigm Initiative, Advancing Digital Rights and Inclusion. She is a human rights lawyer with over 10 years experience in the legal profession and civic engagement. She is passionate about the promotion of human rights for all online and offline. And Tembikile has expertise in research and advocacy at national, regional, and international level. A big hand for Tembikile Matimbe, ladies and gentlemen. And next on the panel, we have the Ombudsman, Honorable Grace Malera. She is a seasoned lawyer and human rights expert with 19 years of work experience in public and non-governmental sectors. She previously held the position of Executive Director of Action Aid International, Malawi, Executive Secretary for the Malawi Human Rights Commission, and the Director of Legal Services and Director of Legal Services from 2003 to 2012 in the Malawi Human Rights Commission. A big hand for the Honorable Ombudsman, Grace Malera. On the panel, we also have a technology thought leader with experience of senior executive management in commercial and corporate banks, microfinance banking, mobile technology, computer networking, and application development. A strategic thinker in applying appropriate to situations, and is looking forward to creating 21st century solutions using mobile phones and technology. A big hand for Mr. Daud Suleiman, the Director General for the Malawi Communications Regulatory. And last but not least, we have Mr. Bram Fudzulani, currently serving as the President of the ICT Association, co-founder of Angle Dimension, now is leading a co-chair and outreach and engagement, is ISOC Fellowship Alumni and Afrinic Fellowship Alumni, African Union PRIDA Project Trainer on Internet Governance, Digital Rights and Net Neutrality Advocate, and Cybersecurity Evangelist. He's a national chairperson for the Malawi Internet Governance Forum and technical member of the Malawi Commonwealth Cyber Security Strategy Development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Fudzulani. And afternoon, our topic is on digital inclusion and state obligations. I would like to start with Tembikile, working for Paradigm Initiative. Give us a picture of the press freedom and the freedom of expression in the African region.
Thank you so much. Looking at the African continent, you'd find that the state of digital rights and digital inclusion, it's particularly worrying. And as Paradigm Initiative, we produce annually the State of Digital Rights and Inclusion report, which covers the state of digital rights and digital inclusion in Africa. And some of the key things that we've noted in through that research, as well as through the Digital Rights and Inclusion Forum engagements, is that we have a lot of gaps in terms of policy and legislation on the continent, which ensures that there's protection of freedom of expression and access to information. I'll give probably clear that we have countries like Tanzania, Uganda, Niger, Senegal, where we've noted that there's been internet shutdowns that are occasioned by regulatory frameworks that really are repressive, and they kind of limit online freedoms. And we also note as well of concern the crackdown on media practitioners across Africa in a number of countries, where we see journalists facing arrests, facing offenses like criminal defamation laws, publication of false news laws that tend to limit the way that they report, the way they perform their mandate as key to ensuring that citizens have relevant information they need. So these are some of the violations that we see. We also, as well as an organization with concern, as well, online gender-based violence for women on the increase. And, we find that the online is not so free and safe for women to be able to express themselves freely without feeling that they're violated, they don't have a safe space. And we also note, again, violations online. And we also see, I think, arrests also following people who also conduct what is called digital activism. When we look at things like the hashtag, Black Lives Matter, we find that the number of, actions that happen online, Zimbabwe Lives Matter, the number of hashtags that happen online, and we see that we've seen that a number of people have been arrested, NSAS and things like that, and we are concerned about the online space as an organization. And apart from this conversation that we're having, which is kind of more elitist when we are sitting in a hotel and we're having good conversations around freedom of expression, we also take cognizance of the fact that there are large numbers of people in Africa who are marginalized and don't have access to digital technologies, as well as access to internet platforms. And that, again, limits how they are able to engage meaningfully online. So therefore, there is no freedom of expression to even talk about online for people in marginalized communities.
Thank you very much. I wanted to narrow down to Malawi. You released a report on the Malawi digital rights covering the year 2020. Would want to share some of the highlights from that report?
I think critically, some of the things that we're addressing in that when there's to what extent it is used to break down on freedom of expression, thing that I will, highlight specifically because it's also highlighted in 2021 report as well, which is going to be launched on 20 May. The Malawi partners here, but it also, buttresses, the use of repressive laws, which we find have no place in a democratic society. And I think we do, acknowledge, what the minister, honorable minister, has mentioned today, and the commitments as well made by the president. I think a couple of days back here in Malawi that, there's a commitment to ensure that media freedoms are upheld and things like that. So you find that Londa report highlighted that as a gap, and also the fact that there's no data protection law in Malawi is most disconcerting, more specifically when you're looking at privacy issues as key concerns, especially now with the pandemic as well. You see that a lot of data has been collected of people, personal data of people has been collected, health data has been collected. You find that in some countries, you find that information is released online with people having not consented to such things. So in the Malawi context, we are particularly concerned that there's no data protection law to safeguard people's personal data. And that is a gap that was highlighted in the 2020 report as well, and is also highlighted in the 2021 Londa report, just to share that. And the report as well, I think it just basically also highlights, when we're looking at now the current report that is going to be released, also highlights the fact that there's no artificial intelligence national strategy in Malawi that kind of covers emerging technologies that are coming on board. And you find that the African Commission on Human and People's Rights has come up with a resolution which talks about, the need for measures and laws that are in place to ensure that the use of artificial intelligence, any other emerging technologies is done in a way that advances human rights and does not infringe on human rights. And you'll find that the use of technology, for instance, in the report that is current now, drawing from Londa 2020 to Londa 2021, you'd find that there are things like, COVID-19 relief that was distributed for coming into effect to marginalized groups in Malawi. The same has happened in South Africa and Senegal, but you'll find that the use of mobile liver tended to kind of marginalized communities. access to smartphones, access to digital technology, enable them to be able to receive money through mobile money transfer platforms. So these are some of the issues that I can just touch on at this point.
Thank you very much, Tombikile Matimbe. And the ICT Association of Malawi is the voice of ICT professionals in Malawi. Mr. Fudzo, I wanted you to give us an assessment of the gains and gaps and opportunities in digital rights and inclusion in Malawi.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I think Malawi as a country, we're looking at where we're coming from. Oftentimes as a, as someone who speaks about digital rights and, people's rights, you're always inclined to comment and point fingers at the government. But I think I'm happy to stand on the podium and point at where we're coming from. If you look at our elections in 2019, even running up to the 2020 elections as well, we have never had situations where internet has been shut down, as seen in neighboring countries like Zimbabwe. We saw recently in Zambia that also happened. Citizens have been, engaged in, giving feedback and updates on WhatsApp, on social media platforms. And we have never had cases where, government machinery would come down on particular individuals, especially on the elections reporting and giving updates. No, that's a very good positive development that we've had as a country. I think I learned from us in how we do the elections and without we are a nation that's still doing in terms of connecting more Malawians to the internet. That government, I think we have been very vocal, because you can't talk about digital rights if people are not connected to the internet. So the number one thing that we need to do as a country is to make sure that we have the majority of Malawians have access to the affordable devices. The issue of power is something that is ongoing, but we need to have Malawians that have access to the affordable devices. And then once they have devices, we need to ensure that they have access to the affordable internet. And then once we do that, then we can begin to talk about digital rights, because then we have connected people, they're online, and how do we ensure that they are also trained in how they can safeguard their digital rights. And that is a space that we're currently working in, I think, to push for policies that allow government to reduce or remove some of the taxes that makes the device to be more expensive, some of the levies to be removed, but also to push for digital literacy across the country. Once I've done that, then I think we'll be able to have a fruitful conversation around whether or not Malawians are exercising their digital rights when they go online. Are they being harassed? Is government targeting specific individuals because they have addressed underlying problems? So I would say that this is what the space that we're operating in and we're pushing for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fudzo. And we were privileged this afternoon to have the Director General of the Malawi Communication and Regulatory Authority, MACRA. I think there's been a lot of talk about to ICT services, statistics from International Union, 40.6% of the Malawi population have access to the internet, one of the lowest in the world. Mr. Suleiman, what is MACRA doing about this issue?
Thank you very much. As MACRA, we are established to ensure that the communication sector is secure, the services are affordable, and there is also accessibility. Accessibility shall mean that any Malawian, any citizen of the country should enjoy communication services. And as you may be aware, communication services are largely broadcasting services, TV and radio, ensuring that every Malawian has access to TV and to radio. We're also looking at telecommunications. We have the mobile phone services. We also have services. And as we've seen, courier services, postal services are part of that infrastructure So as ARA, we sit in one investments that are coming in into Malawi, because to ensure that network structure require capital-intensive investments that must be made. On the other side, we want growth, job creation, and then there is also development of the country. On the general public, Malawians must be protected from those investors that are coming in into the sector, so that they don't price, so that they don't give us services, your calls getting dropped, or the reception of the radio station being poor. All the things, consumer protection is also a key. Developing. Now we are moving into an era where the digital economy is beginning to unravel in Malawi. We should ensure that every Malawian has access to digital services, has access to digital economy, and they can connect so that as of now, but they're being consumers of products that are being found on the internet. But in the digital economy space, we are just emerging as a nation that is becoming digitally enabled. And the next thing that we'd like to see as a regulator is that more and more Malawians are connected. You've given a figure of 14%, which is on the lower side. And we're also tracking another figure, which is showing that 33% of the country has broadband connectivity. And as a regulator, would want to extend that. So we have a new strategic plan that has just been launched through the use of our own funding, as well as the use of the Universal Service Fund. We would like to double that to 72% by the end of 2023. So we have set ourselves a very high target to ensure that, one, we have more Malawians that are connected, and then secondly is that the quality of service that is being provided is a service that is above market standard. We don't want Malawi to be a dumping area where people can just come and deliver poor gadgets and deliver poor services, and they'll run scot-free. As a regulator, I think in a few days from now, with issues with your calls, if you're having issues with the reception, if you have a TV station, your expected satisfaction, opening up a to on a forward trajectory to ensure that we protect Malawians. We create an enabling environment where investors can still come and invest in Malawi, but at the same time that we should develop as a digital nation. Thank you.
You talked about this fund, which was established under the Communications Act of 2016. I just wanted to how is this fund managed, and how do you ensure that the resources are used for the intended purpose?
Thank you very much. So the Universal Fund is coming from a background where the ITU observed that if we don't put a deliberate strategy to ensure that service providers can also go into where there are fewer people, if I may say so, we'll end up with a scenario where only towns are connected, and you have rural areas where you have citizens that are also owners of spectrum that we're using in this space. Therefore, through the USF arrangement, any provider of communication service is supposed to contribute a levy or from their profits into this kitty bank. Now, this kitty bank is operated and managed within MACRA, but MACRA has a board of directors that manages the general regulatory work of Communications Act, it has empowered that MACRA establishes what we call a USF committee. Now, the USF committee seats the Director General of MACRA, one representative from the telecommunications sector, one representative from the courier, and one representative from the broadcasting sector to create an independent committee that looks at the investments and the projects that should be done. Therefore, you see that MACRA would have its major strategic plan that is very regulatory and bigger looking, whereas the USF committee manages another USF strategic plan that looks at underserved areas. So an underserved area could be an area where you don't have network connectivity because Airtel and TNM, they don't have a business case why they should go and connect into that area. So MACRA through USF will make the USF funds available and put up the infrastructure in that area so that Airtel and TNM, they don't spend 100 kwacha to connect that area. Now they spend 20 kwacha. But the net effect is that now we have people in an area where traditionally they would not have been connected, but through the use of the USF interjection, you see that Airtel and TNM have actually gone into that area so that now we have connectivity. So universal service is an obligation that is placed upon us as a regulator. And as I mentioned, MACRA was established by an act of parliament, and MACRA is here to safeguard that the use of spectrum, and spectrum is a natural resource, and it belongs to every Malawian. So whether you're in Talile or you're in Palombe or you're in Blantyre, you should have equal access to spectrum, and you should have equal access to the same quality of service across the communication fabric. So in short, that's how the USF fund operates, and that's how we as MACRA are operating it. So it has its own mini management that reports to Director General, but over and above, we report progress of the USF reports to our board, but the USF projects are approved and managed by the independent USF committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll get back to you, Mr. Suleiman, but I wanted the Honorable Minister, he might be leaving very soon. Maybe you might want to address some of the issues that most of the presenters have talked about since morning. They've been talking about the data protection law, surveillance, and one of the critical issues as well that also Namisa talked about is the issue of state agents spying on journalists and the Malawi Police Service abusing their digital platforms to reduce space for freedom of expression. Honorable Minister, you might want to comment on these issues.
Well, I think the data protection bill is ready, and very shortly we should be able to see movement. We are doing that not because of any pressure coming from anybody, no, but because we believe in what that law will do. So that will happen. That is almost closing up, and you should be able to see a lot of movement, as I said. You've also mentioned about the police. Last time we heard about that was, I think, mid last month, when some of the players had complained that the police or whoever, I don't know, the state agents, so they said, but all we did was to ask them for evidence, because when you're making an allegation, certainly, or you're making an accusation, there has to be some kind of evidence. It's only when we have evidence that the necessary and relevant state agents can come in, zero in, and be able to act, because as you're aware, that this government is built on the rule of law, and then nobody is allowed to break the law, nobody is allowed to be above the law. And but you know, law is a process. Law has some provisions, one of which is whoever is complaining must have some evidence, must have his story or her story told very well, so that those that are supposed to act must act based on that one. But we really condemn that. We think that in this era, anybody, in this case, we don't know who did the hacking last time, but whoever did it, I think that's unacceptable. Certainly, we can't say they are government agents because there's no evidence, and we won't say whether they are private agents because there are just no evidence. We condemn that in totality. And moving forward, I think we really need to start capacitating our abilities so that we're able also to track down this. Now that makes me to permeate into the issue of rights and responsibilities. The issue of internet has brought a new genre of activism where people expect those on the platforms to be as free as possible. In government, we also believe in that. We believe in making sure that our people are free, our people have the freedom, our people have the space that is not interfered. And you can see that we're not just talking about that, but we're actually doing it. This is why hardly 90 days of our being in government, we had to operationalize the access to information because we are not afraid of being transparent. We're not afraid of being accountable. We're not afraid of anything. In fact, we cannot be afraid of our own people, the people we govern, especially that, again, these people are the people that had given us the trust and confidence to run the affairs. Mind you, where I'm sitting now is a privileged position, a position that is given to me through the president, who is given that power and authority by the people of this republic. So we can never be against the very people that gave us the authority and power and privilege to run their affairs. But at the same time, the very same people, as you know, they have their laws. And they also insist and they make sure that nobody should be above the law. So those who are on the internet platforms must make sure that they are not breaking the law, because freedom doesn't mean computing or composing lies against certain individuals. Freedom doesn't necessarily mean doing things that will injure the personality, integrity, and character of other people. That's unlawful. The very laws that the Malawi people had come up with. So we also want to take this opportunity to ask those who are in the civil society space to make sure that in whatever they do, they are also creating awareness to the consumers, the users, and everyone who is on the net, to make sure that we make the internet as a very free space, a very safe space. But again, it should never be a space where people can just break laws. You see, there is a deep sea and a hungry lion at the same time. You find that when the citizens are grieved online, they will come to the state, scream out loud, can you get these people? You know, and if the state will do that, the human rights activists will say, no, I think you are contravening their rights. So you can see that it's a deep sea and the angry leopards there, the situation. So I think to avoid that, we all need to learn to be responsible, because you know that every government operates on law, and being a government that is built on the principle of rule of law, it is not in our appetite provisions to let this country become a lawless country. I think that's not what we'll, because if we do that, it will be the same citizens that will come to us and say, running a lawless nation. So it's important for us to be as responsible as possible. We work together with the human rights activists, to work together with those that are on the information superhighway or that's on the internet. We work together with everyone, and the government must be there to create a conducive environment for people to feel safe. Women should not feel scared going online. Men should not feel scared going online. Government officials should not feel scared being online. Nobody should feel scared, and people should not look at the internet as something negative. Let us make the internet as productive as possible. what we're doing also in government is to ensure that we're making substantial investments. And right now we having to start reviewing our position in the activities in the internet world. We think that in the past we have made a lot of mistakes on very key things. I always give an example of once upon a time, the government used to have a company that was making cooking oil, and we were able to regulate. Government used to have a company, we still have it, but it's not as vibrant, that was coordinating the procurement and the distribution of course, retail selling of fertilizers, RFM, together with ADIMAC. And a few other things that the government was doing. Include government had a lot of interest in banks. Government had interest in agro processing firms. And this country at that time, I think those of us who had the privilege to be at least some semi-mature citizens, were a successful nation. The levels of poverty comparatively were much lower at that time than now. So, it's common currency, common knowledge that right now, those who make cooking oil, for example, are having to pull government by the nose just because they have all means of production. And they're blackmailing government in one or the other. Government is having to gasp for air to stand in for the people so that the people are not abused. We do not want that situation to also arise in future. This is why we're doing all we can to make sure that we are active, substantial participants in all investments of matters digital and the related ICT, because we do not want to have that situation. I can assure you, the biggest thing you can think of at the moment, and as far as the development is concerned, is digitalization. That's the heart of anything. We can build roads, we can build schools, we can build bridges, we can what, but I can assure you, big roads are in the air, big schools are in the air, big bridges are in the air, big everything is in the air now. So yes, we might want to have physical roads, but I can assure you, before those roads are kept busy, people would have already communicated in the air. So we are very, very aware of what we want to achieve. And through MACRA, we have mobilized experts there, experts that will guide us together with other partners in government to making sure that our digital strategy plan or our digital economy strategy is able to be fulfilled, and that Malawi should never be the same. Because as I conclude, if we are not available now, I think then we'll have ourselves to blame. Malawi sometimes tends to be number one on very negative things. Where do you find, what is the poorest nation in the world? It's Malawi. What is the poorest this is in Malawi? Where do you find the most crowded something in nation? It's Malawi. Now this time around, that's not what we want. We want to move faster. That's why you can see we are much better than other countries like Burundi and a few others. We are actually beating them because we know we cannot afford to portray the same character or to portray the same personality or approach, slow approach that we have done on other matters that have defined our situation. Malawi could not have been poor the way we are. It's because of how people were making decisions. It's because of our addiction to being slow, addiction to being negative, addiction to hate each other, addiction to so many other bad things. At the end of the day, sometimes when we're poor and discussing our poverty, we don't even know where it's coming from, not knowing that we are the chief and major enemies of our own progress and development. So on this one, we are not doing that. We want to be as fluent as possible, and we want to move as quickly as possible, and to be very emphatic and solid in whatever we want to achieve. And we know it's not easy. We have also taken a position where we do not want to do easy things, because easy things, everybody can do it. We want to do the difficult things and then be able to make this country a better one in no time at all. And the land is Canaan, and we'll get there. We know others doubt, but we don't. We'll get there, and digitalization is part of it. submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Minister. And I hope with your permission, you would allow us later on to open up for 2 or 3 questions from the audience so that maybe you can respond before you take leave. But I wanted to move on to the Office of the Ombudsman, which is a very important stakeholder in the discussion that we're having this afternoon. Honorable Malera, as an office, have you received complaints on a violation of digital rights? And maybe in terms of the remedies, what remedies are there if, for example, maybe a state institution violates somebody? Do we have anywhere we can go? For example, I'm looking at the police, for example. That's an example that I can give at this point in time.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. To answer to the specific question, yes, the issue that you are raising would fall within the realm of maladministration, particularly if it is done by a public body. And sitting here, I can already point to a few examples where we have had complaints coming to the office around failure of duty, which is one aspect of maladministration. So as you know, our primary mandate is over issues of injustice, particularly from public bodies. So there would be complaints that come our way, for example, in accessibility of information by service providers such as ESCOM, such as the water boards, and other regulatory authorities. A quick example I can give here is the one complaint that I was handling just last month, where you had ESCOM mixing up tariffs for particular households. So there were a number of households in Baraka that were charged on the commercial rate as if they were running maize mills, and yet these were residential. But it was because of a mistake in the way data was captured and used by ESCOM. This happened back in 2012. These people have been going to ESCOM year in, year out to have that kind of matter resolved until they approached the Office of the Ombudsman, and we did an inquiry over that matter and urged ESCOM to produce all the information. And it transpired that they had actually loaded them onto a wrong platform, the commercial platform. We are having to have ESCOM reverse that along with the attendant payments. So you can imagine if these households were supposed to be paying 30,000 a month for electricity, they may be paying 100,000 a month. Multiply that by the monthly bills from 2012. So now the crux of that issue is, will ESCOM be able to refund that money to those households, for example? In terms of the police, there's also been issues that have come to us where maybe the police have not acted as faster as one would expect on issues, for example, of cyberbullying and issues of that nature. So when it comes to accessibility of information by public bodies, and where the responsible public officers are slow or inordinately delay in releasing that information, that would constitute failure of duty. And it's something that would fall squarely within the mandate of the Office of the Ombudsman. And it's something that we can handle. Another quick example, this afternoon, Honorable Minister, for your information, I'm convening a tripartite meeting for a total of 600 ex-Malawi Defense Force soldiers that retired in between the years 2004 to 2012 and have never had their pensions paid. You can imagine what that money would have been if it was paid in 2012. We're now working with the Accountant General and Treasury to have those pensions recomputed and paid. And when you look at the base of that maladministration, it's the issue of data management or records management. In some cases, there are simply no records, or the records are not in order. And in those cases, as Ombudsman, what you do is to tell government, you cannot punish these people because of failures of your systems to put in place good data management. So we are yet to see how that is going to be resolved. But because people talk to each other, while we are handling this one for MDF, already some civil servants have come up, they're saying Nangaife. How about us? Because they are in the same boat. They are retired teachers, they are retired, and all this is centering around data management. So, Honorable Minister, if you talk about digitization, maybe this will go a long way in addressing some of the maladministration issues that we have. Talk of IFMIS, I like to cite my own example. When I got the job of ombudsman, for some reason they didn't put me on the payroll for 2 months, September, October. That is a missed salary. I'm yet to receive it. And this is May. I don't know where to go to complain because I'm obviously conflicted. But part of the reason is always IFMIS. So the infrastructure support that we are giving to all this digitization, I think is worrisome. My final one, I wouldn't leave this platform without bringing in the gender lens, is also complaints that we receive around cyberbullying. We have a group of women's rights defenders in this space, if they can just raise their hands. So we see them. The one constant cyberbullying that we keep receiving, even if today this panel is going to be captured on the news and we make our way into the news, the Honorable Minister, they are going to praise you for promising that data is going to fall and everything else. The comments that Mrs. Grace Malera is going to attract, the number one is going to be, Mahule amene wa matani kusogolo. And we don't seem to have protection against that. So when you talk about regulating the online platforms, when a DG, Honorable Minister, I think that's a long time coming, because we women, we want to feel safe in the online platforms. We want our children to feel safe on the online platforms. These are platforms that are being used for trafficking of women and all sorts, and for really downgrading of women. So these are complaints that my office can receive and we can look into them, but we look more to the aspect of regulation, so that indeed we are talking of digital rights in the sense of privacy, safety, and security, particularly of marginalized groups, women, children, persons with disabilities, and other excluded populations. Sorry, I departed from the question, but it's not often that we get this kind of platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Malera. With your permission, Honorable Minister, we would like to open up for 2 or 3 questions from the audience. I think if we don't open up, I think we'll be infringing on their rights as well as participants to this very important meeting. Do we have any burning issue that you would want the panel to respond to? Quickly, yes. Maybe you can have somebody to help us with the microphone, a volunteer. We've got a hand there, and yes, I think 3.
My name is Eli Damale. My question may sound slightly off topic from what you just discussed, but I assure you it has got everything to do with digital rights and inclusion. Allow me to briefly narrate a single case, especially on an entrepreneur point of view. I would kindly like the panelists to address my question. As you are aware of the video gaming industry, I'm sure most of us have got video games in our phones and our computers and stuff. And I hope you are aware of the amount of revenue that this industry is able to generate globally. The single case that I'm about to read is a young man graduate from NASIT who has spent 3 years building a video game. This video game is not your ordinary video game. It's mostly inspired by the Malawian culture, such as Bule Wankulu, our Malawian villages, our history with the missionaries, and also places like the HHI. He believes that this video game has got a capacity to compete on a global market. He's recently submitted his video game to Google, and Google accepted the video game within a space of a week. He's very optimistic that this step is a step in the right direction, since the game has already received a lot of positive feedback on YouTube the first time he posted it. Now, what he needs is support, especially local support from government, if possible, and also the stakeholders that are present at this time. What he needs is support, as stated, to market the game and also to get real recognition, and eventually to expose Malawi as a country. Now, my question to the panelists and also the various stakeholders that are present at this time: how can this young man possibly get assisted to expose his talent, to nurture it, to grow it as a business using the systems that are already in place? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elita Mwale, for that question. Maybe we can move to the lady in front of Elita. Your name and where you're coming from, the institution you're representing.
My name is Jacqueline Banda. I'm coming from Center for Education and Development, CFED. My question goes to my Minister of Information or DG of MAGRA. We appreciate the current prices of internet, but of late we have been facing problems with calls. To make a proper communication during phone calls, you might make a call, but in between there might be a silence. Then after a minute or two, the calls pick up. People have been complaining, but I don't know, since now we usually complain on social media, I don't know if you have heard about it and what are you currently doing in your offices? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. There was a hand there, and then we can move to the gentleman at the back.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. My name is Dennis Mafrira, and I'm with the Center for Human Rights and Rehabilitation. I have 3 questions. The first question is related to what Honorable Ombudsman talked about.
Maybe before you continue the questions, the Honorable Minister would like to take leave. I think we should allow him to do so. Would like to thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for being part of this discussion. Most of the times when you have a guest of honor, they will perform the official opening and leave, but you have been part of this panel discussion. I think we don't take that for granted. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister.
No, I wish you well, and you have very capable panelists here. I think my role was basically to give the policy position on all of these matters. But I'm sure we have a very capable Director General at MACRA. We have 2 lawyers in front here. And we also have an online human rights activist amongst the panelists. I'm sure I should be able to suffice. But I wish you well, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to being invited again. It's just that I have maybe 3 or 4 meetings between now and the time. So I wish you well.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we can take is it three questions?
Yes. Yeah, so I was just talking about the question related to what Honorable Ombudsman talked about. on failure of duty. One of the examples that you gave was delays by the Malawi police in responding to some of the cases around cyberbullying. But we've also seen the same police act so quickly on some of the issues related to influential people we could call in the society. The question is, how do we explain the disparity around that? And the second question is related to what the DG for MACRA talked about. One of the key issues that you are looking at is achieve 72% of accessibility by 2023. And I was just wondering in terms of how are we planning to get from 14.6% or 33% as you indicated to 72% within a year. So that would be the second one. And the third one would be also related to MACRA, which is besides accessibility and affordability of internet, one of the costs that we've seen, which is also huge, is that of cost of calling. That is the voice bundles and calling generally. We are looking at Malawi being one of the most expensive ones. And this is also part of connectivity. How do we plan to reduce these costs and get to a place where Malawians can communicate in an affordable way? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can take one last one for now. Yes, the gentleman at the back.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Gamadzi from the Human Rights Section, Ministry of Justice. My questions were directed at the minister, but I'll still proceed in his absence. The Minister of Information spoke at length about the dilemmas that authorities face when they are faced with issues of violations of digital space. I would proceed to give an example of the recent story that I think we all know about Minister of Labor, where somebody said something, I think, bad, and some women went to the authorities to report so that the one who did the act should be arrested.
Yeah, you can just continue. Yes. So,
So I wanted to find out in terms of, I think maybe long and short-term government policies in terms of awareness, so that people should exercise their rights, I think, with responsibilities. I think people should know their limits, and they should not cry that maybe they're ignorant about the law. So I wanted to find out from the, I think people in the front will still help us, if there will be any deliberate long and short-term policies. For instance, you put them in the curriculum. So
Thank you very much, Matthews, for that question. I would believe one of our panelists is going to tackle that awareness on cyberbullying and other issues. I think there have been a number of issues that have been raised. The issue to do with video games, sorry, I can't summarize it. The dropped calls, accessibility, improving accessibility, the cost of calling, violation of the digital space, and maybe awareness about cyberbullying. Where do we start from?
Let me start. I think MACRA, as the regulator, we are guided by two acts of parliament. So there are two major laws that MACRA operates on. The one that most people know of is the Communications Act, which gives birth to MACRA, defines what MACRA is, what its role is, and what it can do. But then there is another law as well, which is called the Electronic Transactions and Cybersecurity Act of 2016. In that act, from section 83 to section 92, we are dealing with issues of cyber harassment, cyber stalking, and all sorts of things that relate to the issues that have been addressed. So in as far as we are concerned, in the digital space, the guiding law is there. So some of these things where the police has come in to pick someone, they have used one of our laws, which is with MACRA, which is the Electronic Transaction and Cybersecurity Act. But I'll agree that I think what we haven't done well as MACRA is the awareness part of it, where I think the general populace is not fully aware of that law that exists that actually protects everyone. And therefore, once we aggressively take it out, it should begin to draw the lines that you should now begin to know that the moment you're touching an electronic device with your thumbs and the keyboard, you must be responsible because you are now in our space and that space is regulated, and through that regulation, there are laws. So the Electronic Transaction Act and Cybersecurity Act, it does have regulations regulations and rules that have been put in place. So as MACRA, I think I mentioned that we are rolling out a call center. I think this will be the first time that the regulator will fully open up to the members of the general public. So through that call center, if someone has been insulted digitally, or there is a problem somewhere, you now have a point of call where you can come through. But over and above that, issues of quality of service where calls are being dropped. Remember, MACRA is sitting on one end, and then there are operators that are extending the network, and then there are the consumers. As I mentioned, one of the key issues that MACRA deals with is consumer protection. We even have a consumer affairs manager, a whole manager that looks after issues about consumer complaints and what have you. But what we have not done well in the past is to actually have a space where you can complain when your calls get dropped, where you can complain when your data vanishes, or where you can complain when all of a sudden your balance was 20 kwacha, but now it is 0, and you haven't made a call or you haven't been online. So the establishment of the MACRA call center is a very strategic issue that will also help us to gather that data from the consumers. Over and above that, as MACRA, we have regulatory systems that we run that monitor the performance of the networks, Airtel and TNM. And through the KPIs that we have agreed with them, we're able to go back to them. And there are a lot of fines that we're pushing through to MACRA, to the operators. Some of those things are things that we are in-house, that we don't take them out for you to appreciate the role that MACRA is pushing through. But I would like to assure you that we do have systems that we sit on, and we're able to see the quality of service that have KPIs that we have agreed. But then the world is moving towards what we're calling quality of experience. It is the experience that we're now beginning to measure. And that experience, it is a human interface. It is about you and your mobile gadget and the service provider. So we can only get feedback from you. This is why I'll go back to the core center initiative by MACRA being a very strategic element, because now we'll begin to get those quality of experience measures from the general public. So if we have a lot of complaints from Chiradzulu, for instance, against TNM, then we'll obviously know that then there's something wrong with the TNM service in Chiradzulu. Whereas when we sit on our end, we are checking on quality of service. So our quality of service may measure uptime of network. So maybe the network may be up 99%, but the strength of the signal on the ground is very, very weak. Therefore, when people connect, the experience is very, very different. So I'll just move on to the other issues. There was a question that how is MACRA going to move from 33% to 72% in 12 months? So there are about 4 initiatives that we're rolling out. The first issue that we're doing is an initiative called Community Data Operators. So what we're going to do is we are licensing about 33 community data operators in each district in Malawi, including on Likoma. We're going to have a data operator that will be licensed through the use of the USF funds and also through the use of MACRA funds. What we'll do is with these community data operators, we're going to extend broadband connectivity. So automatically, that means if we were to, once we give them 5 KPI areas in each district, you'll see that 5 times 28, we're already over 100 areas. Those 100 areas, if coverage is 200 meters of each of those areas, you'll see that we are adding quite a bigger chunk of an area that's now being, that is being covered in. So those community data operators will extend coverage across Malawi, and they're going to create a parallel data market. So I'm saying parallel data market because as of now, data, you look at data as mobile from your TNM and Airtel, but now there's going to be a Wi-Fi signal that goes, let's take an example of Kawari. So we license a Kawari data service provider, and that broadcasts a broadband signal in Kawari and provides data at a cheaper rate. Where are they going to get that data? Initiative number 2 is what we're calling diplomatic data corridor. You know, Malawi is landlocked. We get our data from Tanzania, from Zambia, and from Mozambique. In 2 weeks' time, myself and other officials from ESCOM and internet service providers, we are going to Tanzania to negotiate a safer passage of data using the Tanzanian public infrastructure into Malawi. The same, from the same trip, we're going to Zambia to also negotiate with the Zambian counterparts so that we use the Zambia state-owned infrastructure to bring data to Chipata. The same thing with Maputo. We're going to negotiate with Maputo so that we use the public infrastructure in Mozambique to bring the data to Miranje. When that data comes into Malawi, we're going to plug it into ESCOM. What that means is that now we have a cheap alternative route of data from the coast into Malawi. As of now, the route that data is using are privately owned data links that the providers are using. Therefore, they're tapping data from Dar es Salaam into Songwe, and they're putting their margin at Tukwaja. We are going to use the same infrastructure that is owned by Tanzanian government into Malawi, plug it into the Malawian owned infrastructure and charge it at 50 kwacha, because it's still the same product, a parallel market, and we run it on the community data operators. Therefore, we have now introduced a competitive element into the market. As a regulator, we are allowed to create an environment where competition can thrive. At the end of the day, it is about bringing more Malawians into the fold. The third initiative that we are doing is an initiative called Muuni Fund. So with Muuni Fund, it will address partly what the madam mentioned about this kid who has a gate. So Muuni Fund is about research and innovation. MACRA is seeding 350 million Malai kwacha. Every year we're going to put that money in there. And we are in a partnership with other stakeholders that are going to match our money. In every year, we're going to have 1 billion Malai kwacha that is going to be pushed towards innovation and research in and around the telecommunications area. What that will do is that it will now create a launch pad where smart kids like the one that you have said will now come access a fund that will take them to scale their operations. But at the same time, create a resource base where the academia, the youth, students, even SMEs can come in and tap into an established fund for them to participate digitally in the economy. So those are some of the there's an issue of voice calls being expensive. We are aware of that. We are actively looking into that. So once we have made some headway with the data prices becoming low, I think the initiatives I have explained should give you a hint that there is a further drop in data that we should be expecting. The voice side as well, we're going to expect that drop. But then you should also understand that on the voice side, we have 10 million connections, 10 million subscribers that are active there. On the smart devices side, we're looking at about 1 million. Therefore, it is also a game of numbers. We don't have a lot of Malawians that are using smartphones. So MACRA is also championing an initiative where we're going to do local smartphone assembly in Malawi. So I think by 11th and 12th of this month, myself and the minister in Rwanda to learn about how Rwanda has done their local device assembly, so that when we come back, we should now have a framework where we'll partner with technical colleges in Malawi and establish assembly points that we can produce smart devices cheaper in Malawi instead of importing devices at a higher cost. So all these initiatives, the key there is to ensure that more Malawians are connected, more Malawians have access to cheaper internet and voice services, and that more Malawians are in the digital space in a safer environment that is also being regulated and the laws are active in there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General. Honorable Malera, would you want to respond to some of the issues that have been raised? Mr. Fudran?
Thank you. Maybe I can take the one where the question was why the police are quick to take action when it is influential people in terms of issues of cyberbullying, and not when it is an ordinary person like you and me. And I think that's very critical for us, civil society, to keep maintaining our oversight role. My own thinking would attribute that to politicization. If we all discharged our mandates independently, I think we would have a police that would rush when Beatrice Mateo lodges a complaint to say, I'm being cyberbullied, and not just when it is maybe an influential politician out there. So how do we keep our watchdog institutions, our public service delivery institutions, to make sure that they are not seen to be taking political lines when discharging their constitutional or statutory mandates? In the same vein, DG, I think all the responses that you have given in terms of how we can support innovation, that's so central to digital rights. I was particularly interested when you talked about the Muuni Fund, which is aimed to catalyze innovation. But to what extent is that Muuni Fund going to identify a gem somewhere in Intalile? Probably it will be our children in the Bishop Mackenzie's of this world. So for us, our role as Ombudsman really is to see to it that there's inclusion in everything that happens. There is depoliticization. I say this based on the lessons that we have seen over the years, for example, in the implementation of similar funds like the NIF funds. And then while I still have the microphone, I also would want to challenge all of us in terms of, I think all the responses that are coming here are talking about, we will do this, we shall do this. I look forward to a day when we are coming back here And the tone is, we are doing this. We have rolled out the Moon Fund. I think the years are running past. We are now into the third year of the new administration, but I've sat in a number of panels where we're still speaking in the future tense. What happened to the present tense? I think time for strategizing the documents, you know, the learning studies and everything should be matched with speed. We are talking of digital rights. We are talking of innovation. Innovation is not going to wait if we are going to take the business as usual approach. So the invite you. I hope there will be another follow-up forum. And I hope at that panel you'll be talking of, we are doing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Malina.
No, thank you. I'll just address two issues, which was addressed to the minister, but in his absence. I just wanted to ask of the participants that are here, how many of us have tried to report a cyberbullying issue to police? By raise of hands. I think we have gender activists. You have. Okay. There was an issue about a young man who posted a photo of an albino on Facebook and said for sale. Do you remember that issue? Some years back. Because we have this mentality that when you go online, you can hide your identity and therefore, harass people and bully many people. But what we don't know is that through the law that the DG spoke about, the police are working hand in hand with Facebook, for example, so much that when you report those issues, they are able to trace and track this individual and actually arrest them. But the most important thing that we haven't done as activists is we haven't built capacity around our police law enforcement officers. You find that on issues of gender-based violence, for example, we have a specific police unit, within even the specific department within the police. And this is because we're building capacity for the law enforcement officers to understand how they can deal with the issues of gender-based violence. Do you think it's time that we also fight and advocate for a digital rights unit within the Malawi Police Service so that these issues are well understood? When we go to police, they understand exactly what you're talking about. They understand what they need to do. There's a clear sort of guideline on how they can actually prosecute and take the whole issue all the way. So I think we have the duty, the activists that are here, to also look into that issue, build capacity for our law enforcement officers, but also understand and build capacity on Malawians on how they can actually report these issues. We're glad that we have people who have reported these issues, but there are majority, like many Malawians are being embarrassed, harassed online because they don't know how they can report these issues to police, but yet it's a crime. So I think we have a lot of work to do. In terms of the young man who is very brilliant, I think there's MHub behind there. They have a pavilion. These are technology hubs that are actually incubating and working with a lot of innovators. So I don't know why this young man did not take opportunity to work with this kind of institutions, because through MHub, for example, you are connected to organizations like UNDP. They have been able to give entrepreneurs, I know, to the tunes of 30 million Malawi kwacha, just for them to scale their businesses. So maybe it's an issue of who this young man has been talking to. From the ICTAM point of view, we work with a number of stakeholders to empower and promote such kind of innovation. So talk to anyone in the room, and I think you should be able to get the help that you need to connect the young man to the right people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bram Fudzulani from ICTAM. We are privileged to have the Deputy Police Spokesperson among us. Maybe you might want to comment on some of the issues concerning the Malawi Police Service. Do we have the microphone?
Thank you very much. On our part, as the Malawi Police Service, I have to say that we are only law enforcers. Basically, we don't make laws, and all the laws we enforce are valid.
as you know that we can't force a law which is invalid. That will contravene the Constitution of the Republic of Malawi. So most of the times, I'm happy that there's a mention of awareness to the people, because there is an example of a nurse who were arrested earlier. And we received a lot of comments which were negative, that we are infringing the rights of people in terms of freedom of expression. But when the other quarters saw the screenshots, they couldn't believe that that person had really shared that post. So I want to assure the people here that we need to sensitize the people because of the way some are using the social media. The social media is there for sharing of information, not to maliciously damage other people's reputation. And they are mentioning that other people's marriages are even collapsed just because of the way people use the social media. So the key to us is that we are only law enforcers. So when some of the blame are coming to us, our hands are tied, we don't make laws. So we should understand from both angles. Where there are draconic laws, we know the process, how to repeal those laws. So you have to understand sometimes with us, where we have made mistakes, sometimes you can say we do reflect and agree that, oh, here we made a mistake, so we can move forward. But we are ready to work with all stakeholders. Where you feel we have infringed people's rights, let us meet and discuss. We have our Inspector General. You can come to his office and lodge a complaint, even against police. You have seen some police officers because of the complaint which were brought forward to the Inspector General. So I'm happy that now we are moving forward.
Thank you very much, Bwana Harry Namwaza. What an intelligent way to respond to that issue. Thank you very much. We are running out of time. We need to wind up the panel discussion. Do we have any burning issue from the audience, and then we can get back to the panel? Yes, maybe we can start from the back, and yes, the second one and the last one will be Charles. Or maybe if you are audible enough, you can disregard the microphone.
We are back, I think.
Thank you.
All right, my name is Clement Maku, and I'm coming from the Young Politicians Union. I have a question for all the panelists, depending on the angle that they will read the question. But I think I will start with the statement that I think I've monitored a lot in terms of social media uploads. There's so much pictures from the minors, I'm not quite sure it's the same in other countries, but in Malawi, I think there's so much pictures of the minors that are being uploaded on digital platforms, including creating Facebook pages for children that are as young as 2, 3, 6, 8 years. I just want to understand from one perspective, Makra, Mr. Fudzran, and the Ombudsman, if in absence of the protection law, what remedies can we use as a country to protect these minors? Most of them are girls, which in the subsequent years, they stand to be bullied using the very same pictures their mother, their uncles, their sisters, they posted on the digital platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clement, for that question. Maybe we can take the second one and move on to Charles.
Thank you so much. My name is Ruben Moyo. I am a lecturer in ICT at Moses University. So my question goes to the Director General of MACRA and partly to the President of the ICT Association. There was a time when we were in class and we were discussing a case study on connectivity. And I think outside one of the classrooms, there were ESCOM technicians laying out the fiber, and the student came and asked to say, I have just learned that ESCOM is also laying fiber connectivity. But he believes that the mandate of ESCOM is not that. And through, again, the director echoed that they want to make some discussions with the neighboring countries and then ask ESCOM to connect. I haven't responded to the question that the student asked because I did not have an answer. But maybe from here I will get an answer as we are going towards inclusion in the digital rights. The first question is, would MACRA provide license to any other institution that would come and ask for it? Because clearly ESCOM is electricity supply. I think that's their mandate, even in the name itself. Would MACRA also do the same to Water Board? Would MACRA do the same to any other organization that wants to have a grid? Number two is, as we want to protect digital rights, isn't it not prudent for MACRA not to put things in disarray, like allowing ESCOM? They are already struggling to provide electricity, and now we want them to be providing connectivity. There were strategies that MACRA has laid out to improve the challenges in terms of communications and connectivity. Can't MACRA take up that role and just allow ESCOM tap from them? Is it just we want to create a parallel market and we will do the same to everyone? The last question from me is the ICT president and ICT Association president in MACRA as well. There is too much rush for everyone to get connected, and each and every company, they want to do the same thing. So we would find that we have 5 companies, they all want to do the same thing, but they're using different approaches. For example, the mobile monies, you find that there are several companies, they want to go into the same space, but they're using different strategies. Are there guidelines laid out so that we should be able to control who does what and when is it supposed to be done? Because we might be rushing, everyone wants to go digital, but things are in disarray. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruben Moyo from Zuni, the mandate of ESCOM and fiber connectivity. I know the DG is going to respond to that issue, as well as the other 2 questions that you have raised. And the other one was from Clement Makua on posting of pictures of minors on social media. The last one from Mr. Gajorowek.
Not entirely the last one, but yes. I grabbed the microphone as it was going to him. Just a quick one. I think mine is a comment, and maybe I would want to get an assurance from MACRA. So earlier on, I think Zadzeko had explained that they are establishing a unit or a department to help in fighting cybercrime. And I just wanted to request that MACRA should be open enough in terms of what exactly this department will be doing. Simply because at the moment, we do have several government entities, non-state actors such as telecommunication companies that are really collecting private data. And no one knows how this data is being utilized. That's really number one. So maybe just being open in terms of how private data is used
And secondly, in terms of fighting cyber crime, I know that there's a lot of abuse on how we're using the internet and so forth. But at the same time, how sure are we that those that are maybe critical voices, maybe critical of the administration, will not be spied upon using a state, entity simply because they have that capacity to be able to track, to be able to tell who is doing what? And how do we balance the protection of whistleblowers in this particular case as well, where they hide their identity, but they're giving out information that would help in corruption and so forth. So how do we balance the, I know that they would really help in fighting cybercrime, but at the same time, how do we protect citizens from, a state agency being abused in terms of tracking critical voices? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Charles, do you still have the question, or maybe she has asked on your behalf?
Patrick, thank you so much. Mine was just maybe to sort of provide a clarification in terms of what we're advancing from the human rights perspective. That our position largely is that defamation still remains defamation. People are allowed to sue, but we are encouraging that it must be through civil litigation, not criminal litigation. Nobody should be sent to jail for simply inserting what is deemed to be inserting a certain individual. Those individuals who feel offended, inserted, they have got a recourse through the courts, through civil mechanism. But what we are fighting against is the criminal, defamation. So these are the two different things that we must understand. So when people say, you are supporting somebody who inserted the president and so forth, if the president feels inserted, he has got a recourse through the courts, through civil procedure, but not using the police to arrest somebody, prosecute somebody, send somebody to jail. How many times do people offend each other? And if all cases were ending up through criminal prosecution, that really will be a big challenge. Follow the pattern of the crackdown. It is those powerless holding accountable the powerful, and the powerful are using the police. If you look at the individuals who have been arrested in this country since 2020 for inserting President Chakwera, there are around 4 who are deemed to have inserted the president. There are around 4. These are individuals, all right? And then there's another one, a member of parliament recently. Somebody had simply raised an issue to say, we suspect the member of parliament to have diverted the resources meant for the constituency. And this member of parliament goes to police. I'm being, defamed for diverting public resources. And the police, they go and arrest this person. This is an accountability question, all right? Now, when you begin to criminalize citizen voices and demand for accountability, then you are killing democracy. Those that feel offended, they can go to court and file, but they should not use the state machinery. And the state machinery the police are talking about are being used by powerful politicians. The guy who was arrested is because National Bank is National Bank. It's a big institution. They go to the police. This person is accusing our officers or employees of, stealing money from customers. National Bank had a very straightforward civil recourse. They could have gone to court, sue this gentleman for defamation. This person should have been answering charges under defamation mechanism and not being prosecuted and convicted. If it was not for the alternative of giving him a fine, this person should have been serving a jail sentence of 2 years simply for raising that. And we are saying this is not the right way to go. The last one I also wanted to highlight that when you look at the Electronic Transaction Cyber Security Act that is being used at the moment, the number of provisions there that are vague, that do not make sense at all. For example, it is an offense for you to what is called spamming. And it doesn't even define what spamming is. And using this provision, several individuals have been arrested. say you are providing false information, this is spamming. All right. So anyone who is deemed to be providing false information, can be arrested in this country. And at times, even people have just been forwarding messages. They can also be arrested for, disseminating what is regarded as false information. We are saying these are not, laws in tandem with a democratic constitution. There are better ways of dealing with these issues. The very last one is the issue of spying on citizens. When I have a conversation on WhatsApp, it's an end-to-end encryption. It is a protected conversation. It's a private conversation. If the state leaves Capitol Hill and begins to spam on what people are discussing in their private life, then the state, whatever is going to get in there is their own making. This is a private conversation. This is a private house. Why should the police arrest somebody on a private conversation? What is the state doing in a private conversation? That is interception of private information. It is a violation of right to privacy. So the state is not justified in any way by interfering with the right to privacy. We have the state has been given its own avenues, its own platforms. What is it doing in people's pockets, in people's phones, in people's private conversations? Whatever it faces there, it's of its own accord because it's not invited. It's inviting itself in private conversations. So if it invites itself in that conversation and it finds an insert going to the president is inviting that because the president is not invited to those private conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles, for your comments. I would like to get back to the panel and we conclude the panel discussion. Maybe we can start with the DG.
I think let me start with comments from Charles. I think first and foremost, let us be careful with pronouncements that we make. The statement that says spying on citizens is a very, very loaded statement. It has a bigger risk to the country. We are here advocating for connectedness of everyone. We want more and more Malawians to come into the digital space. We want Malawians to have the confidence in the digital infrastructure, in the platforms that are there, that they should feel that they are protected. Now, if leaders like Charles and Teresa bring issues of state surveillance and citizens being spied on without evidence, without hardcore evidence that indeed the government of Malawi is spying on people, what we're doing is we're planting a negative vibe towards people going into the digital space. It sounds sexy, it sounds good. State surveillance, state spying, spy machine. Let me give you what it would take for MACRA to spy. It means MACRA would have to make an investment of about $40 million US. That investment would have to then target phones. For us to target those phones, would have to go into Airtel and TNM. For us to go into Airtel and TNM, it means we have to have openings, which are called SS7 protocol into Airtel and TNM. Now, Airtel and TNM don't manufacture the systems. They buy from Huawei, they buy from Nokia, and they buy, these are world standard systems. The world standard systems don't allow the United States to platforms. The of China is not allowed to run SS7 protocol on the Huawei systems that are running in China. Therefore, how can TNM, which is running a Huawei platform, allow MACRA to run SS7 protocol on a Huawei licensed system? And then once we have done that as MACRA, then we reach into the mobile phone that belongs to Zadzigo, and then we start tracking that phone. Now, how many Malawians are there that are connected? Let's assume 1 million. We at MACRA need about 2 million people that should be monitoring At least 2 people should be monitoring Charles's phone, because we don't know at what point Charles is going to make a call. It's going to be random. So the reality of it is that state surveillance is almost twice the budget of Malawi. We as an economy cannot afford to do that. We have serious pressing issues that this government, with its little coffers, would have to go and invest that money in. Therefore, my plea is that when we hear of international governments doing surveillance on its citizens and what have you, engage the regulator, engage the law enforcement, and truly find out what sort of systems we're running. Because at any point in time, come to Macra, we'll open any door, we'll open any system, we'll give you a password to any system and verify if we're doing surveillance. Because once we have crossed that line, then the civil society and us are now going to talk the same thing. And what we're saying is universal access. We want everyone to be connected. We want the citizens of Malawi to feel safe in the digital space. We cannot do that if we begin to blow false alarms, if we begin to raise red flags where there are no red flags. Therefore, I would like to assure you and assure the citizens of Malawi at large, the government of Malawi, through any of its state agents, is not spying on its citizens. Because I've just given you a high-level overview of what it would take. The amount of the investment the government would need to make to undertake citizen surveillance versus the money that this government has versus the pressing needs, the hospitals, the drugs, the roads that must be made. AIP, 160 billion every year has to go there. There is no way the Secretary to Treasury would allow Macra to push $50 million US into a surveillance system. As far as I am DG, I don't think we are running that. Maybe 20 years from now, after I have left as DG, then maybe other people will do it. But for now, going forward, what I want is the media, the civil society, the youth activists, and the regulator, we must agree that let us create an environment which is digitally, which is giving confidence that the digital space is actually good. So we have a problem. The problem is that our digital space in Malawi is monetized by mobile money, and mobile money is heavily hit by fraud. What that is doing is that more people are losing money through Tugulapa Como and all sorts of things. More people are shunning the use of mobile money because there is this rise in mobile money fraud. What that is doing, it has a net effect of people that are adopting the lowest of technology, because mobile money is using USSD, the lowest of technology. Therefore, if we don't control this flight, if we don't restore the confidence back, we have a digital economy which is not powered by transactions, which is not powered by money, and therefore we are going to lose out. In digital economies, it is a cashless environment. Digital value moves from one point to another without hard cash. Therefore, the confidence that we instill in the citizenry, using from the basics of technology, USSD, *211 hash, *444 hash, if no one Tambala is missing in there, then these guys are going to now graduate to the next level. As they graduate to the next level, now they can use the website to order pizza. Now they can use the website to pay school fees for their kid. So, so the issue of surveillance, no, we cannot do surveillance. The issue of the special unit that is being established at Macra, that unit is called Computer Emergency Response Team. Its function is defined in the Electronic Transactions and Cybersecurity Act. Its role is actually to be our first defender as the country on cyber attacks. So warfare has moved from tanks, guns, it has now gone into a cyber warfare. A very good example, Ukraine versus Russia. Ukraine had an upper hand because its cyber warfare was slightly advanced than Russia. So even us as a country, we run a risk of having an attack coming in. When an attack is here, where do we go? it is at that computer emergency and response team. So at Malawi level, we are establishing the Malawi set. But then that Malawi set is going to establish what are called sectoral sets. The banking sector is going to have its own set. The military is going to have its own set. The academia is going to have its own set. Because in case there is an attack on all universities, all of a sudden no student can access their learning platform, and there are issues of ransom that should be paid. The first people to respond to that will be the academia set. Therefore, I just want to assure you that the set function is actually for national cyber security, and that function is nowhere near going to be used for counter surveillance. The issue of ESCOM, yes, ESCOM is in two parts. So ESCOM is regulated by Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority, but the technology that ESCOM uses, it needs what is known as earthing. So the power lines that are running up and down, they need a way in which they can earth into the ground. So to do that, they have a fiber cable that is running on those power lines. So that fiber cable is used in ESCOM for grounding and earthing. And then secondly, ESCOM runs a system that is called ASCUDA. ASCUDA is the management information system, the platform that ESCOM uses to know that in Kanengo there is a fault, to know that in Kula or at a certain point there's a fault. Therefore, any point where there is a substation in Malawi for ESCOM, it needs to be connected. Therefore, ESCOM, through Malawi government, got a loan and interconnected all its infrastructure using this fiber. Now, what that meant was that ESCOM, over and above the earthing and the use of the ASCUDA, it has excess capacity. So think of a fiber cable as a 17-lane highway that ESCOM has built from Chitipa to Nsanje. And yet ESCOM only has one track that is using on one lane, and it has 16 other lanes that have been provisioned. So ESCOM established a department in it called the Fiber Optic Company. That fiber optic company got licensed by MACRA because they're now using a telecommunication. So ESCOM, as the bigger company, has a licensed unit, which is licensed by MACRA. Therefore, the fiber you see ESCOM running to homes and pulling up and down, that fiber is actually licensed by MACRA. But remember, there are two primary reasons why ESCOM has the fiber. One for grounding and two is for ASCUDA. But then the fiber has given ESCOM an opportunity, a business opportunity that it can exploit. This is why now ESCOM has become a very critical communications player that all banks, all mobile phone companies are now bringing their cars on those other 16 other lanes. Still more, we have other lanes that are still vacant that ESCOM can tap in. So this is why ESCOM makes it an easy go-to option for MACRA to say, okay, then these other two lanes, connect them to Songwe and let's connect to Dar es Salaam. These other two lanes, let's connect to Chipata so that we bring in more capacity for internet. But the one that we are dealing with as MACRA is the optical fiber unit within ESCOM. Does MACRA just allow anyone to apply? Yes, we have what is called a walk-in application. So even today, if you wanted a radio station license, or if you want a mobile phone license, just go to MACRA, go on our website, download the forms tomorrow, go and deliver. And then within 60 days, we'll respond to you. Within 90 days, if you're successful, we'll give you the license. We are in a free market. MACRA cannot stop anyone from doing a business. The obligation that is on MACRA as a regulator is one, to protect the consumers, and secondly is to ensure that there is growth in the sector. And then finally, the issue of minors coming in, the bigger issue here is digital literacy. Now, digital literacy is cutting across from CEOs all the way to garden boys, all the way to Magadi. We are not sure how best we can use this thing called a digital platform. Therefore, we think that we can just do anything. We can take pictures, unnecessary pictures, post them. We can take pictures of minors, post them. We, as a nation, we are at an earlier stage of adopting this digital space. Therefore, digital literacy is an issue that we must begin to discuss and to highlight. Because what digital literacy is going to do is to stabilize, to make us smell the cup of coffee, so that we now begin to act accordingly and we space. Remember I said we are so consumed to being consumers in the digital space, because as Malawi we are not producing content that we can transact on. And as we transact to that content, then we monetize and we make money. Very few people are making money on social media in Malawi. Case in point, Namadingo. Namadingo relocated to Zambia because Zambia, you can monetize YouTube content and what have you. Therefore, he gets paid in Zambia. But here in Malawi, Line Ho, we had a hit, 9 million views on TikTok, but zero kwaja paid to Guinness, because we cannot monetize that content in Malawi. So as a regulator, we've seen that as an issue, and it's a risk, because if we have the Namadingos of this world going to Zambia to monetize their content in Zambia and not here, then there is flight of content, there's flight of economy, there's flight of Malawians. So we have engaged those social media giants. Very soon, we're going to have Malawi being able to monetize. So yes, again, I'll say very soon, but you know what? If there is one thing that you should have is have trust in this DG of yours that you have for the time being, because things are happening. If you haven't seen them happen, please look around. Things are happening, and trust you me, things are going to happen. We see it here next year, the story will not be the same. Malawi will be somewhere by far in this digital space, and we're going to do this together. This is why it's very important for us to be open. It's very important for us to have candid conversations about what is happening, so we don't speculate. We give each other what it is so that we can hold each other accountable. As your DG, I am here to save you, and I am going to do the best I can to ensure that my country moves forward, and we are champions of the digital space, and we're going to be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bwana DG, and be assured that we have got trust in you. And I will not allow Teresa and Charles to ask any more further questions. In the interest of time, I wanted to give our panel a minute each so that you can conclude. Thank you.
I'll try to do that in a minute. I cannot promise that, but I'll do my best. I'll start with the issue of children and say that the issue of children and their safety online is very critical. And the UN has released a a general comment that addresses this and outlines the role of everyone who is involved, who has to make sure that children are safe online. And of course, we've got the African Children's Charter that lays down the framework. And I think for Malawi, it's critical that we begin to interrogate how we can ensure that we have policies that are in place to ensure children's safety online, bearing in mind that it's not only one individual's job, it's a multi-sectoral approach. So definitely the private sector has to be part of this conversation. And if there's anything that is of concern, we need to be able to engage with Meta, for instance. We need to be able to engage with them if you think that there's a Facebook post for a 2-year-old. I'm not so sure how that would have worked out, but this is the kind of conversation we need to be able to interrogate with the private sector. And it is also the duty of the government to be able to ensure that internet intermediaries put the necessary safeguards for everyone online, not just children, women. And also, of course, we did not interrogate the issue of persons with disabilities, which is something very critical to this conversation. So we need to be able to do that. And I will then touch on, state obligations. I know this panel was supposed to kind of turn on to state obligations of Malawi, and just looking at the state obligations of Malawi, Malawi is a state party to the African Charter. It is a state party to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And with that mentioned, you'd find that Malawi has to adhere as well to key guidelines that are provided, and you find what needs to happen with regards to protecting Article 9 of the African Charter, which advances freedom of expression and access to information. Having said that, I will then give you a practical illustration that if I am in my house, in the privacy of my house, and I have guests who come to my house, and we interrogate issues of, political discourse, ideally, if anyone within my house is not happy or within that space, they cannot then decide to then go outside of my house and then start making reports that get me arrested for violating a certain law in a certain country. In the same way, when we translate rights offline to the space that is online, what we're saying is, if I am in a WhatsApp group, because all of us in this room are in one WhatsApp group or the other, if I decide to pass a certain criticism over somebody, the issue here is, if somebody who is in that group decides to then make a report to the police and I get arrested, ideally we're saying the law that is enabling that arrest is a law that is ultra vires the constitution, first of all, of Malawi, because Malawi protects freedom of expression and access to information. And secondly, it violates the obligations that Malawi has to actually adhere to treaties that are international, your African Charter, your International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So in particular, I'll give you an illustration of Section 86 of the Electronic Transactions Act and Cybersecurity Act, rather, of Malawi. It has words like obscene, lascivious, lewd, indecent, as part of the communications that, if you make such communications which are obscene, lewd, lascivious, indecent, you get yourself arrested right now. In fact, I saw actually something from the Malawi Police Service that was highlighting how somebody got arrested, I think in the past week in Malawi. And that kind of provision is what we're saying when we're looking at the elephant in the room. We're saying policy legislation must be able to enable freedom of expression and access to information. So when we have a provision which is that vague, what is obscene? What is lascivious? What is lewd? What is indecent? This kind of terminology can be left to any interpretation. And this is what we're saying, that it is vague, to say the very least, and overly broad. When we're looking at limiting a right, a fundamental right and a fundamental freedom, we're saying there should be a legitimate aim that this kind of limitation aims to address, and it must be necessary and also proportionate. And we're saying that specific provision, for instance, to just give an example of Section 86 in the Electronic Transaction and Cybersecurity Act of Malawi, we're saying it ultra vires all these things, and it violates freedom of expression and access to information. So as Paradigm Initiative, we're saying it's key that we are able to openly interrogate the policies that we're having in existence to see where are the gaps, where do we need to repeal, so that we align with all these good things we've been echoing, we've been hearing from the president, we've been hearing as well from the minister, to advance freedom of expression and access to information. Right now is a matter of expedience. What we need, for instance, is a repeal of certain provisions which are vague and broad and overreaching, cracking down on free speech.
Thank you very much, Tombekile Matimbe, Community Manager for Paradigm Shift, Paradigm Initiative. Honorable Malera.
One minute is equal to 3 minutes, but I'll try to keep mine into the 1 minute. States' obligations, number one, I think we must move away from over-regulation. So how we use the penal code, how we use the electronic transaction and cybersecurity. We cannot be seen to be using those in violation of the rights that are guaranteed in the Constitution, because of the principle of constitutional supremacy. I think this is the number one state obligation that I needed to emphasize. We can also not allow our state agencies to use some of these laws in ways that continue to shrink the civic space. So for instance, the moment Charles makes a statement that is critical of the powers that be, is the moment suddenly the data of their institution is going to be extracted from MRIA and asking, have they been tax compliant, and so on and so forth. Before you know it, MRIA is on their neck. If it is an organization that is running a radio station, before you know it, MACRA is on their neck, because all of a sudden they haven't made statements that have been welcomed by certain quarters. So I think we cannot afford using all these another state obligation that I would like to emphasize. Now, what is the challenge to all of us? Whether we like it or not, as our colleague from the police service mentioned, these laws right now are part of our statute books. The police are on the receiving end. They'll be duty bound to act. The challenge is, Tobekile, are you funding us so that we can start strategic litigation? We've already dealt with some of those kind of laws. We've dealt with the logio and vagabond. You know, the law that they used to arrest pedestrians on the street. You are at Bandilo around 12 midnight, they're going to arrest you if you are on foot. You and me, because we go there in our cars, they're not going to arrest us. We said that is unacceptable in a democratic society. So we need investment in strategic litigation. It's going to be a long time for these laws to be addressed by way of parliament because they tend to serve certain interests. They tend to safeguard the status quo. The best way is strategic litigation through civil society activism, but that would need a lot of investment. To Minister of Information, in the absence of the minister, and to you, DG, we can assure you we have confidence in the capabilities of our regulatory authorities, including MACRA. But as we are moving forward, what are the state obligations in that regard? We, some of us, because we work for pro-poor institutions, would want to see accessibility of digital rights by the less educated and people with low incomes. We want to see this in rural areas. We want to see accessibility for persons with disabilities. We want that when COVID strikes, and for my children that are at Kamzo Academy, their education is not disrupted. We want the same for a child that is learning in Nyezerera in Palombe. I think when we get to that kind of space, we'll begin to talk about the digital economy. We want the women to be included. If we are going to go digital and register our businesses, is the Mandas woman included? Can they access something and register their business? Can they transact electronically? Until you do that, we shall keep coming back here, DG, and reminding you and Minister of Information of your responsibilities. Finally, we need harmonization of our policies. Those of us that stayed long, we actually wonder what is going on. You know, 1 minute, somebody from Roads Authority is fixing the Gulliver Road. The next minute, somebody from Water and Sanitation is coming to dig out the sewer system, the same road that was being fixed. So we need some sort of harmonization. If you are going to take ICT to Rikoma, is the rural electrification program also making inroads in that district? Can our policy makers begin to sit on the tables and rationalize some of this programming? Malawi Human Rights Commission, we want your proactiveness on anything to do with ICT. Finally, when we are going out there to do awareness raising, let us be very holistic. Someone here is saying our minors protected online. And I was perusing through the Child Care Protection and Justice Act. There are duties of parents in that law. I was looking at what local government authorities ought to be doing. MACRA, do you take Human Rights Commission along so that as you are sensitizing on Communications Act, they're also telling people their roles and duties under the Child Care Protection and Justice Act? Until we get holistic, I think we'll keep moving around in circles. And the digitization initiative will actually continue being a curse rather than a blessing that we want it to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Malera. And finally, Mr. Bram Fudzolani from Actum.
I think for me, I will still underscore the importance of the activists that are in this room, those that are listening. I think it's very important for us to be engaged at the drafting of the laws. I think that is where we can make our impact or voices heard. There is a discussion around reviewing the cybersecurity and electronic and cybersecurity law 2016 through MACRA and Ministry of Justice. I think most of the civil organizations that are here, be on the lookout. I think that is something that you can contribute, raise some of the issues that we're discussing here, make sure that the review includes some of the key issues and observations that we have come up with. It's very unfortunate that when we're drafting the data protection bill, most of the organizations were was very important legislation. So justice now, anytime it will go to parliament, but I believe that most of the issues were captured. But just to underscore the point that I think it's very important for us to advocate and raise our issues when policies and laws are being made and drafted, because then that's, we can bring about change. But a lot of responsibility on the DG. I think you have our support. We believe in what you're doing. We have worked with the DG on a number of issues, and I think we've seen some progress. And not to place too much responsibility on yourself, but I think whenever you need a hand, I think you have quite a number of people in the audience. I think the Ombudsman has also pointed that out, that you can always count on to make sure that you are steering us in the right direction in this digital economy. So our strategy, the Malawi economy strategy, the Malawi digital economy strategy, has ambitions to take us to 80% of Malawians to be connected by 2026. And I think you also have the same ambitions, but I think as Ombudsman pointed out, that we need harmonization of policies to make sure that what the strategy is talking about and what you're trying to strive speaks to the national agenda. And also at the end of the day, we're able to follow what is happening within the Malawi 2063 and MIP1 implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bram Fudzorani, President of ICTAM. We have now come to the end of this panel discussion, the first panel discussion. We're supposed to have this discussion for 1 hour, 30 minutes, but I think we are way beyond 1 hour, 30 minutes. But I think there were a number of issues that we needed to discuss, and it has been a learning experience. I'd like to thank, in absentia, the Honorable Gospel Kazako, Ms. Tembikire Matimbe, Community Manager, Paradigm Initiative, Mr. Daud Suleimani, DG, Makra, Honorable Grace Malera, the Ombudsman, and Mr. Bram Fudzorani, President of ICTAM, for participating in this panel discussion. I think they deserve a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And I would like to thank you for your active participation during this panel discussion. Just to remind you that we have got 2 more this afternoon. The other one will be taking stock on access to information, freedom of expression and press freedom in Malawi. And the last one will be women and disability rights in the digital age. Thank you very much. And I'm told that lunch is ready and it's being served at the main foyer. So please, our panelists, you can join us for lunch and everybody here. Otherwise, I would wish you all the best and continue with the discussion on digital rights and inclusion. Bon appetit.